Most people believe that when someone hurts you, you need to respond, you need to explain, you need to defend yourself, you need to make sure they know what they did. Stoicism teaches something far more unsettling. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. Not the silence of weakness, not the silence of fear, but the silence of self-control. When someone hurts you, they often expect a reaction, anger, sadness, an argument, anything that proves they still have access to your emotions. And when you give them that reaction, you give them power. Stoic philosophy is not about revenge. It's not about winning emotionally. It's about removing yourself from the game entirely. Because when you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop chasing closure, something strange happens. The other person is left alone with their actions. No validation, no resistance, no emotional feedback. Just silence. And silence forces reflection. In this video, we're going to explore 5 silent habits rooted in Stoicism that don't seek payback, yet often make people deeply regret hurting you. Not because you punish them, but because you no longer give them what they wanted. These habits aren't manipulative. They aren't passive-aggressive. They're not about looking strong. They're about being strong. They shift the focus away from them and back to your own character, dignity, and peace. If you've ever been hurt and wondered why reacting only made things worse, stay with me. Because what you're about to learn isn't about controlling others. It's about becoming untouchable. 1. You don't react emotionally. When someone hurts you, the first impulse is almost automatic. You feel the surge. Anger tightens your chest. Words rush to the surface. You want to respond, to defend yourself, to explain, to push back. That reaction feels justified, even necessary. But Stoicism teaches a hard truth most people never learn. Your emotional reaction is exactly what gives the other person power. When someone hurts you, they often aren't just acting randomly. Consciously or not, they're testing boundaries. They're provoking a response. They want to feel their impact on you. And the moment you explode, argue, or plead, they succeed. A Stoic response begins with something deceptively simple. You pause. Not to suppress emotion, not to pretend you don't feel it, but to refuse to let emotion drive your behavior. This pause is where power shifts. Most people confuse emotional restraint with weakness. They assume silence means you lost. That calm means you didn't care enough. In reality, emotional restraint requires far more strength than reaction. Anyone can react. Very few can remain composed when their ego is challenged. Stoicism teaches that emotions are natural, but actions are choices. You don't control the initial feeling. You do control what you do with it. When you don't react emotionally, you disrupt the dynamic. The other person expects escalation. They expect confrontation. They expect you to mirror their intensity. And when you don't, confusion sets in. They replay the moment in their mind. They wonder if they went too far. They question whether they misjudged you. Because your calm denies them confirmation. This is why emotional restraint often leads to regret. Not immediately, but later. When there's no argument to justify their behavior, no reaction to blame, no drama to point at, they're left alone with what they did. Stoicism is not about being passive. It's about refusing to be controlled. An emotional reaction hands control outward. A calm response pulls it back inward. This habit shows up in small but powerful ways. You don't raise your voice. You don't rush to explain your intentions. You don't demand understanding. You observe. You let the moment pass without feeding it. That silence becomes a mirror. People often reveal their motives when their provocation fails. They push again. They exaggerate. They try to elicit something, anything. And if you remain steady, the imbalance becomes obvious. They look emotional. You look grounded. This contrast is uncomfortable for them. Stoic thinkers understood this deeply. They believed that when someone insults you, they only succeed if you agree to be insulted. If you don't react emotionally, you don't validate the insult, you don't confirm the narrative, you simply let it fall. This doesn't mean you tolerate mistreatment indefinitely. It means you choose when and how to respond. Later, when emotion has cooled, you may set a boundary. You may walk away, you may change how you engage, but you don't do it from heat. You do it from clarity. And clarity is terrifying to people who act from impulse. Over time, this habit changes how others treat you. People become more cautious. They realize emotional leverage doesn't work. They sense that provoking you leads nowhere. And that's when regret often appears. Not because you punished them, but because they lost access. They no longer control the emotional temperature. They no longer dictate the tone. You do. This is why not reacting emotionally is the first and most important silent habit. It's the foundation. Without it, every other Stoic habit collapses. Because once emotion takes over, silence becomes impossible, boundaries become reactive, and dignity gets compromised. But when you master this pause, when you let emotions pass without obeying them, you send a clear message without saying a word. I'm not moved by what you're trying to provoke. And that message lingers far longer than any argument ever could. 2. You withdraw your attention. After you stop reacting emotionally, the next instinct for most people is to stay engaged. They keep checking. They keep waiting. They keep hoping for a sign. They tell themselves they're over it, but their attention says otherwise. Stoicism takes a different approach. Once someone has hurt you, you don't punish them with words. You remove access. Attention is not neutral. It's currency. And most people don't realize how much power they give away by continuing to watch, respond, and mentally orbit around someone who already disrespected them. When you keep giving attention, you're silently saying, "You still matter enough to occupy my inner world." Even if you never speak to them again, your attention keeps the bond alive. Stoic discipline begins where attention ends. Withdrawing attention doesn't mean making a scene. It doesn't mean announcing boundaries. It doesn't mean dramatic silence. It's quiet, almost invisible. You stop checking for updates. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wondering what they think, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. This is where regret often begins for the other person. Because people don't feel loss when they lose arguments. They feel loss when they lose access. When someone hurts you, they often assume they still live in your mind, that you're thinking about them, that they still matter. And when your attention disappears completely, it destabilizes that assumption. No messages, no reactions, no subtle signals, just absence. This absence creates a vacuum, and humans are deeply uncomfortable with vacuums. They begin to ask questions. Did I go too far? Why aren't they reacting? Why don't they care anymore? The irony is this: you're not trying to make them feel anything. You're simply not feeding the connection. Stoicism teaches that attention should be given only to what you can control. Your actions, your values, your responses. Other people's behavior doesn't qualify. When you withdraw attention, you reclaim mental space. Your thoughts stop circling. Your energy returns inward. Your emotional balance stabilizes. And from the outside, this looks unsettling. People are used to reactions. They're used to explanations. They're used to emotional feedback. When that disappears, they're left with nothing to push against. This is why silence paired with disengagement is so powerful. Words can be argued with. Silence cannot. And attention, once removed, is difficult to regain. This habit often feels uncomfortable at first. Your mind reaches for the familiar pattern, checking, analyzing, hoping for resolution. But Stoicism reminds us, Peace does not come from understanding others. It comes from releasing the need to be understood. Withdrawing attention is not about pretending someone doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let them occupy space they no longer deserve. Over time, this creates a clear signal. You are no longer emotionally available for misuse. And that's when regret tends to surface. Not because you confronted them, not because you demanded accountability, but because the emotional door closed without noise. They didn't get a final word, they didn't get reassurance, they didn't get closure on their terms, and that absence lingers. Stoic philosophy doesn't celebrate this effect. It simply acknowledges it. When you remove attention, you remove leverage, and when leverage disappears, people are forced to sit with their own actions. Some will reflect, some will feel regret, some will feel nothing. But none of that is your concern anymore, because your attention has returned to where it belongs, with you. This is why withdrawing attention is such a powerful, silent habit. It doesn't attack, it doesn't provoke, it doesn't escalate. It simply ends the exchange. And in doing so, it restores your freedom. 3. You improve. Quietly. When someone hurts you, there's a temptation that feels almost irresistible. You want them to see that you're fine, that you're doing better, that their actions didn't affect you. So people announce it. They post more. They perform happiness. They signal growth. Stoicism rejects this impulse completely. Real improvement doesn't need an audience. In fact, the moment you start improving for someone else to notice, you've already handed them influence over your direction. Quiet improvement works differently. You don't explain your progress. You don't advertise your discipline. You don't hint at how far you've come. You simply become harder to disturb. This is where regret often begins. Not through comparison, but through contrast. When you improve quietly, there's no narrative to argue with, no performance to dismiss, no claim to challenge. There's just a change, and change without explanation is unsettling. People who hurt others often rely on a fixed image of you. They assume you'll remain emotionally accessible, reactive, or predictable. Quiet improvement breaks that assumption. You don't argue your worth. You outgrow the situation. Stoic philosophy places enormous emphasis on character over reputation. Reputation lives outside your control. Character does not. When you focus on improving your character, your discipline, your clarity, your self-command, you're investing in something that compounds silently. And silence is what makes it powerful. If you announce your growth, it invites comparison. If you display it, it invites judgment. But if you live it quietly, it invites reflection. People begin to notice the absence of things. You're less reactive, you're less available. You don't seek reassurance, and absence forces questions. What changed? Why don't they respond the same way anymore? Why don't they need this? These questions don't arise because you bragged. They arise because your behavior no longer fits the old script. Stoicism teaches that the best response to disrespect is not retaliation. It's elevation, not moral superiority. Internal elevation. You strengthen routines, you sharpen thinking, you improve health, you refine boundaries. Quietly. No messages sent, no updates posted, no signals given, and this creates a delayed effect. At first, nothing seems to happen. No reaction, no apology, no acknowledgement. Then, later, sometimes much later, regret appears. Not because you punished them, but because they realize they lost access to a version of you they will never see again. Quiet improvement denies people the comfort of familiarity. They can't say, "You're still the same." They can't dismiss your growth as performative. They can't argue with what isn't announced. They're left with distance. Stoic thinkers understood this deeply. They believed that virtue should be practiced privately, not for praise, but for stability. A person who improves quietly becomes unpredictable in the best way. Not chaotic, not erratic, but no longer available for misuse. This habit also protects you. When improvement is quiet, it stays pure. It's not shaped by reaction. It's not distorted by validation. You're not adjusting your growth to be seen. You're adjusting it to be effective, and effectiveness doesn't require witnesses. Over time, this changes how people relate to you. Some feel inspired, some feel uncomfortable, some feel regret, but none of that drives your behavior anymore. Because your improvement isn't a message, it's a boundary. Stoicism doesn't teach you to improve so others feel something. It teaches you to improve so you are no longer dependent on how others behave. And that's why quiet improvement is such a powerful, silent habit. It doesn't argue with the past. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It simply renders old dynamics obsolete. You don't say, "You hurt me." You don't say, "I'm better now." You let your life answer instead. And that answer, spoken without words, often echoes longer than any confrontation ever could. 4. You don't seek closure. After someone hurts you, the mind naturally looks for resolution. You want answers. You want explanations. You want them to understand what they did. This urge feels reasonable, even healthy. But Stoicism makes a sharp distinction here between understanding and dependence. Seeking closure from the person who hurt you often isn't about clarity. It's about relief. Relief from confusion. Relief from emotional tension. Relief from unfinished feelings. And that's where the trap lies. When you seek closure from someone who caused the wound, you're placing your peace back in their hands. You're saying quietly, "I can't move forward unless you give me something." Stoic philosophy rejects this idea entirely. Peace is not something another person grants you, it's something you reclaim. People who hurt others often expect one last conversation, one final message, one emotional exchange that allows them to justify themselves, minimize the damage, feel forgiven without changing. Closure gives them comfort. Silence does not. When you don't seek closure, you deny them that comfort, not as punishment, but as consequence. They don't get to rewrite the story. They don't get to explain it away. They don't get the relief of being understood. And that absence lingers. Without closure, they're left with unanswered questions of their own. What did they really think? Did I misjudge them? Was I wrong? These questions are uncomfortable, and discomfort is often where regret grows. Stoicism teaches that not every ending requires a conversation. Some endings require distance. When you don't seek closure, you accept a difficult truth. Some people are not capable of giving you what you're looking for, not because they're evil, but because they lack the awareness, accountability, or maturity. Waiting for closure from them only prolongs your attachment. So instead, you close the chapter internally. You decide what behavior you will no longer tolerate, what access is revoked, what standards you're enforcing. Quietly. No announcement, no dramatic goodbye, no final speech. This doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you process it privately, through reflection, journaling, discipline, and time. Stoic thinkers believe that the mind must learn to resolve itself. If you rely on others to fix your emotional state, you remain vulnerable to manipulation. When you don't seek closure, something subtle happens. The other person senses it. They realize there's no final act, no chance to soften the outcome, no opportunity to reframe themselves as reasonable. They're left exactly where they are, with their actions. And this is where regret often deepens, not because you confronted them, but because you didn't. There's no closure to dilute the impact, just silence. This silence is not passive-aggressive. It's not meant to send a message. It's simply the natural result of self-respect. You don't reopen wounds that are already closing. Stoicism teaches that dignity often means walking away without being fully understood. And that's difficult, because the ego wants acknowledgement, the heart wants validation, but wisdom wants freedom. When you don't seek closure, you cut the emotional cord cleanly. You stop negotiating the past. You stop replaying the conversation that never happened. You stop waiting for an apology that may never come. And in doing so, you move forward faster than the other person expects. They're still thinking about what they should have said. You're already living differently. This imbalance is powerful. It creates a delayed realization. They lost the chance to matter in your inner world. And that loss, quiet, irreversible, often weighs heavier than any argument ever could. Stoicism doesn't promise that everyone will feel regret, but it teaches that your peace should never depend on whether they do. Not seeking closure is not about them. It's about ending the cycle. And once the cycle ends, the silence speaks for itself. 5. You live as if they don't exist. This habit is often misunderstood. People assume that living as if someone doesn't exist means ignoring them out of spite, blocking, unfriending, making a show of distance. That's not what Stoicism means. Stoic detachment is quieter than that, cleaner, more final. Living as if they don't exist doesn't mean you're angry. It means they no longer occupy any meaningful space in your inner life. No resentment, no storytelling, no mental rehearsals. Just absence. Most people never reach this stage. They may stop talking, but they keep thinking. They replay conversations. They imagine future encounters. They wonder what the other person thinks. That means the bond is still alive. Stoicism teaches that true freedom begins when someone loses relevance, not just access. When you live as if they don't exist, something profound shifts. You don't reference them in stories. You don't bring them up in explanations. You don't mentally check how they would react to your choices. You simply live. And this is where regret often becomes unavoidable. Because relevance is what keeps people psychologically connected. As long as someone believes they still matter to you, positively or negatively, they retain influence. But when they become irrelevant, the influence disappears. This is deeply unsettling for the ego. People can tolerate anger. They can tolerate conflict. They can even tolerate being disliked. What they struggle with is being forgotten, not erased dramatically, but quietly replaced by indifference. When you live as if they don't exist, you don't announce it. You don't say, "I'm done. I don't care. You mean nothing to me." You just stop orienting your life around their presence or their absence. This creates a psychological asymmetry. They may still think about you, wonder how you're doing, replay the moment they hurt you. Meanwhile, you've moved on, not in haste, not in denial, but in alignment. Stoicism teaches that you only control two things: your judgments, your actions. You don't control whether someone feels regret. You don't control whether they reflect. So instead of waiting, you disengage completely. Living as if they don't exist also means something important. You stop defining yourself through the wound. You're no longer the person they hurt. You're simply yourself again. This is often the hardest part, because pain creates identity, stories, meaning. Letting go of someone completely means letting go of the version of you that was shaped by that hurt. But that's also where strength returns. When you don't keep someone alive in memory, you reclaim authorship of your life. Your routines no longer include avoidance. Your choices no longer include reaction. Your thoughts no longer circle old moments. And from the outside, this feels unsettling. People expect signs: distance, bitterness, visible detachment. But Stoic detachment leaves no trace. It looks like peace. And peace is often what triggers regret, not because it's cruel, but because it exposes contrast. They remember the version of you they had access to. They compare it to the version they can no longer reach. and they realize something too late. They didn't just lose a conversation, they lost presence. Stoicism doesn't teach you to disappear to punish others. It teaches you to disappear from places where your dignity is compromised. Living as if they don't exist is not an act against them, it's an act for yourself. It means your future isn't shaped by their past behavior, your peace isn't dependent on their remorse. Your life no longer orbits an old wound. This is the final silent habit. Because once someone becomes irrelevant, nothing else is required. No explanation, no boundary-setting speech, no emotional accounting, just distance, and a life that no longer references them at all. And that absence, that's what lingers. Not as revenge, not as punishment, but as consequence. If you look closely, none of these habits are about punishment. They're not designed to make anyone suffer. They're not strategies to win. And they're not about proving strength. They're about removing power. When you stop reacting emotionally, when you withdraw your attention, when you improve quietly, when you stop seeking closure, and when you live as if the person no longer exists. You're not doing something to them. You're doing something for yourself. Stoicism teaches that the greatest freedom a person can have is independence from what others think, say, or do. Not indifference born from bitterness, but detachment born from clarity. People regret hurting you, not because you chased justice, but because you refused to play the role they expected. No arguments to justify themselves, no emotions to manipulate, no access to your inner world, just dignity, just distance, just silence. And silence has a way of revealing truth. It forces people to sit with their own actions, without distraction, without reassurance, without relief. Some will reflect. Some will feel regret. Some won't feel anything at all. And none of that determines your peace anymore. Because Stoicism was never about controlling outcomes, it was about controlling yourself. If you've been hurt and wondered why reacting only made things worse, remember this. You don't need revenge to be free. You don't need closure to move on, and you don't need to be understood to live with integrity. Sometimes, the strongest message you'll ever send is the one you never speak. If this resonated with you, leave a comment with the words, "Silence is strength." And if you value calm, discipline, and stoic clarity, subscribe. Because the most powerful response is the one that leaves you untouched.